Good morning, Hassan Huskies. This is your principal, Dr. Miller. Today is Monday, January 27th, 2025. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Hassan Huskies, we are learning about self-control in the month of January. When you show self-control, you are able to manage your big emotions. Kindness at school. Remember, kind acts are things we can do or say to help others feel good. You can do a kind act for someone when they are happy or at any time. All right, Hassan Huskies, it's birthdays. All right, we have happy birthday. We have Piper in Mrs. Greenwald's room, Hall and Mrs. Spears, Nora and Mrs. Lazar's, Omari and Mrs. Harns, Hollister and Mr. Spitzak, Leo and Miss Doro, Penelope and Mr. Ashley, Jack and Mrs. Moline, June and Mrs. Petter, Grace and Mrs. Lazar's. And then we have half birthdays. All right. So we have half birthdays. So these are July birthdays. We have Penelope and Miss Edie, Brandon and Mrs. Petter, Daler and Mrs. Greenwald, Harriet and Mrs. Dockendorf, Reagan and Mrs. Holloway, Jonathan and Mrs. Edie, Chase and Mrs. Holloway, Minna and Mrs. Meeker, David and Miss Dockendorf, Ava and Mrs. Craig, Isaiah and Mrs. Reed, and Ethan and Miss Edie. All right, so we had birthdays. It's going to be a great week. All right, Hassan Huskies, make sure that you listen to your teachers and that you make good choices. And remember, you belong here.